They have activated Dark Kirby. Oh boy. Here we go. That was Joel Klatt's comment about this guy right here. Look at this guy is going hard, man. Kirby, we are getting old, my friend. We are getting. I'm saying me and you. I'm not talking about him exclusively, but the curious thing here is just the way Georgia beat Texas. I think showed what they can do, but we gotta take Georgia for what they are, not just the best parts. I mean, we've seen them struggle at times. We know what they're capable of, but just because you're capable of something doesn't mean you're going to do it all the time. And this image right here was taken on the sideline at the Alabama game, third or fourth quarter. I think probably third quarter now that I look at it. When Georgia was called, or Alabama was not called, I think, for a pass interference play. And Kirby was, I think, understandably pretty livid. Look at the visor in the background. That's actually one of the better images of him that I've taken. It's challenging to take pictures of a head coach, believe it or not. But he was so active that day. And from that point forward, Georgia's had 3 really good wins. I mean, the game against Mississippi State, a lot of people, that was their hesitation going into Georgia, Texas. But I watched Texas play Mississippi State. It was not good. Y'all got to listen to me sometimes when I talk about these things. I mean, all you have to do is watch and see. And Mississippi State's giving way too many people trouble and losing. That's their problem, is they're giving A&M, Georgia, Texas trouble and losing. So are they going to get somebody along the way? I don't know. But since that Alabama game, since that moment, a game they should have won, which I said after the game and so forth, this is about, though, where Georgia's at. I mean, they're a 6-1 team that probably deserves to be 6-1. If they didn't lose the Alabama game, you could say they should have lost the Kentucky game. I'm not sure they should have lost the Kentucky game, though. I got to say that out loud because they were the better team. They just didn't score, touchdowns. Whereas, and Kentucky didn't score any touchdowns. They kicked 4 field goals, 2 of which were extremely long, career highs, one of them. So I'm not sure I go with, they should have lost that game. But they earned the loss from Alabama by the way they played at the beginning. When we say Dark Kirby's been activated, that was what Joel Klatt said. Dark Kirby has been activated. This team is a machine. So, yes, okay, but they are a team that has not been consistent the way that you'd like to be consistent. Now, they're more consistent than not. We talk about this sort of stuff all the time on Riding Home After Games. If you are not watching Riding Home After Games, you're missing out. If you are interested in sponsoring those shows, let me know. We reach tens of thousands of people with one video in that scenario. So if you're a Georgia-based company or you have interest in our audience, dean@dawgpost.com. But when you look at this team, I mean, the defense has been pretty good. I mean, honestly, with the exception of the Alabama game and the Mississippi State game, they've not allowed more than 15 points. I don't know. It's hard to say the defense played bad. Now they didn't play well against State, that's for sure. But it's hard to say the defense, just generally speaking, has not played well. The offense has been pretty good. I mean, it's not been explosive the way I thought it would be. I thought ETN would be much more like we've seen lately the whole season than what we've seen the whole season. And, they had a really hard time against Kentucky running the football. Kentucky's defense they're a good defense. They've been beaten up pretty good lately, but they're a pretty good defense. Up there, it's challenging. I also think it's possible the Texas game may have seemed closer than it was, and yet Georgia could beat them worse next time. Georgia kicked a fair amount of field goals against Texas that they turned the ball over at the, inside the red zone. Texas did that as well. But there were a lot of opportunities that Georgia had that they didn't score. That that could have been tough. That could be tougher for Texas in the future. The other thing too is, Georgia went into a pretty nasty environment and won that game. So when you look at Texas, they went punt, fumble, punt, interception. So maybe you take away the fumble and the interception, but they weren't moving the ball at that time either. But this is how they started that game. Punt, fumble, punt, interception, punt, fumble. They weren't doing anything. They barely had the ball the first half. They just could not do anything. Now, second half was much better. Touchdown, lost it on downs. Touchdown, which came from the 9-yard line. Fumble. Lost it on downs. Texas only had 2 drives over 60 yards against the Dogs. That's not great. Georgia had 2 themselves. One of them was an 89-yard drive. The other was a 62-yard drive. Georgia scored from the 34-yard line. They kicked a field goal. They kicked field goals getting the ball at the 28 for Texas. That's got to be a touchdown. Right? That's got to be Kirby's talking about, hey, we're not scoring enough touchdowns. Yeah, man, he's right. They kick the ball. It's Texas 30. They kick a field goal. That game could have been completely over at the half. It could have been nasty. It could have been like 31-0 at the half, but it was 23. So, and in the second half, now I'll say this too. Georgia drove the ball 62 yards and turned it over at the 18 for Texas. So that could have been 3 more points or more touchdowns. So Georgia had their mistakes too. But once they settled down and settled in, they were just the better team. But they did kick too many field goals. So that's a bit of my hesitation in the grand scheme of things is, just because Dark Kirby's been activated, he's never not Dark Kirby. He's never not got a machine. The question is the machine running the right way? Are they appropriately, so there's stuff all the time that can get in your way. They got to score more touchdowns when they have the opportunity. They've become more explosive. They have. When you look at the amount of explosive plays they had against Texas, it was a fair amount. It was a fair amount of explosive plays. You just go to the box score and see, Carson's longest pass was a 43-yarder. They had an 18-yard run. They had a 21-yard pass to Arian Smith, a 21-yard pass to Lawson Lucky. That's pretty good. That's a lot of explosives. When you look at the long for Texas, Arch Manning had a 21-yarder that didn't matter. Other than that, Wisner had one. His longest run was 10 yards. That was it. It just wasn't a lot of running. Either team didn't really have much in the way of running. Texas got it going a little bit in the second half with more explosives, but they had a 34-yarder and a 23-yarder. That was it. So it wasn't like they were just zipping up and down. Their long for the day was a 34-yarder. You need Arian Smith. His longs, they got to be 20 yards or more. And that was it. He had ETN had a 13-yard reception. So they did, when they were throwing it, they were more likely to throw bigger plays and sort of controlled passing. They only wound up with 175 yards passing, Georgia. Not nearly as many as Texas, who was throwing it pretty much the whole second half at 230. But when you look at the end of this schedule here, and you see what Georgia's got remaining, Florida is going to be trickier than people want to admit. Now, I don't see them losing that game, but that's going to be trickier than people admit. Ole Miss has shown that they can score. Ole Miss has shown that they cannot play well. It's both. Tennessee has shown they can score. Tennessee has shown they cannot play well. Arkansas, Florida. There was another game in there that they weren't so hot. So it's all right there for Georgia. And, there's so much that they can, the Oklahoma game for Tennessee was fine. but it's really been lately they're just not scoring. They're not. They in league play they have not scored over 25 points. Georgia's not had that problem. Georgia's only been under 20 points once, which was the Kentucky game. And Tennessee still got to deal with Kentucky. I think that game is up there. Georgia scored 30 against Clemson, 13 against Kentucky, 30 against Clemson, 30 against Bama, 30 against Auburn, 40, but 30 against Mississippi State, 30 against Texas. That's consistency. Like when you're playing your games and you've only had one game under 30 points, maybe that game was just a night fight. When you play your season and you've had two games over 30, as a defense, what does that say? Okay? Is the offense for Georgia more consistent than the defense? Man, I don't know about that. I'm not sure about that part. I think they're getting there. But there are some losses to be eaten here if they don't watch it. I mean, Georgia Tech's not going to beat Georgia. It's hard for me to get from point A to point B there. But Georgia Tech can just say, hey, look, we're just going to run the football. And that's just not a lot of fun to deal with all the time. I don't know if Haynes King will be healthy for that game or not. I mean, I think that it's possible Tennessee could say, well, we're going to start playing better. They host Tennessee. They host Kentucky, They host State. Those are the two games they host before they play Georgia. Like, Georgia is the end-all, be-all for Tennessee. They win that game. They play in the SEC championship almost certainly. With their bizarro loss to Arkansas and a game they should have lost to Florida. I mean, Georgia is probably the best team in the country right now. And they've probably been the best team in the country all year. People want to look at the Alabama game. They want to look at the Kentucky game. They're now forgetting the Clemson game. Clemson's out here killing teams that are not good, but they're killing them. You look at Texas. I mean, Texas and Clemson got a lot of wins and one loss each, both to the Dogs. They're both top 10 teams. You look at Alabama, I don't know what to say about Alabama. I mean, it could be that they caught Georgia on a night and they nearly lost that game, man. So there's still stuff to go here. I mean, I think that, are you playing well? Are you playing the way that you should be playing? Are you playing the way that you want to play? I think lately for Georgia, the answer to that globally is yes. I mean, you take these last 12 quarters of football against Texas, Auburn, and Mississippi State, and you say, what was the collective situation? Was there any moment in any of those games where Georgia was not going to win the game? The answer to that is no. And you think about a rivalry game, a game against the number one team in the country, and then a game against Mississippi State. And you consider all of those things, that's a good situation to be in. But it's not total domination like, these two groups. Like Georgia in 21 and 22 was just a straight up machine. Nothing had to be activated. They were plugged in already, and they were ready to roll. I think they're close, man. They're just not there quite yet. Thanks for watching.